Medieval authorities didn't just ban ideas, they banned plants. They ripped them out of the ground, burned them in fields, and made it illegal to even touch them. And the people who kept growing them anyway, they were tortured, executed, or had everything they owned taken from them. But here's what nobody tells you. These weren't dangerous plants. They were useful ones. Some of them were the most effective medicines, foods, and tools that Europe had ever produced. And the moment they started threatening the wrong people's power, they were gone. 7 plants, 7 erasures. And the real reason behind every single one of them has been buried for centuries. We think of medieval Europe as a world of ignorance, superstition, backwardness, a civilization stumbling in the dark waiting for the Enlightenment to save it. But that's not the full story. Medieval farmers, healers, and brewers had developed systems so effective that modern scientists are only now beginning to understand them. They grew plants that survived droughts without irrigation, brewed medicines that outperformed anything in a pharmacy, and cultivated crops that fed entire populations through famines that killed millions. And then, one by one, those plants were erased. Not because they failed, because they worked too well for the wrong people. Between the 5th and 15th centuries, the question of what was allowed to grow in European soil wasn't a farming decision. It was a political one. Sovereigns, popes, and city councils used botanical erasure as a weapon to control economies, enforce religious obedience, and eliminate anything that gave ordinary people too much power. What you're about to discover isn't just history, it's a pattern. And once you see it, you'll never look at a garden the same way again. In the summer of 1395, the Duke of Burgundy sat down and wrote one of the most consequential documents in the history of food. He wasn't declaring war, he wasn't raising taxes, he was banning a grape. On July 31st, 1395, Duke Philip the Bold issued an ordinance targeting the Gamay grape, specifically Gamay noir à jus blanc, and he called it something extraordinary. He called it a natum disloyal, a disloyal plant. Very bad. Very disloyal. And he ordered every single vine in the Côte d'Or ripped out of the ground within 1 month. By Easter 1396, they were to be, in his own words, eradicated, destroyed, and reduced to naught. Now, why would a duke declare war on a grape? Here's what the history books leave out. The Gamay grape was extraordinary. It produced up to 3 times the yield of Pinot Noir. It ripened 2 full weeks earlier, and in the years following the Black Death, when the labour force in European vineyards had been decimated, it was the grape that kept struggling farmers alive. That was exactly the problem. Philip the Bold owned nearly 200 hectares of Pinot Noir. His entire fortune, his reputation, and the prestige of Burgundy as the wine capital of the known world depended on Pinot Noir being scarce, premium, and irreplaceable. Gamay threatened all of it. So he didn't just ban the grape, he built a surveillance system around the ban. Informants who reported neighbours still growing, Gamay received 1/4 of the resulting fines. The remaining 3/4 went directly into the ducal treasury, and it still didn't work, not immediately. Peasants who had survived the Black Death on Gamay wine weren't going to destroy their only income source, because a duke told them to. The resistance was so persistent that Philip's grandson, Philip the Good, had to reissue the ban in 1441, and again in 1455, declaring that the Dukes of Burgundy were lords of the best wines in Christendom, and they intended to keep it that way. Eventually Gamay was pushed to the margins, specifically to the granite soils of Beaujolais, just outside the strict jurisdiction of the Côte d'Or, and there it survived. The 1395 Ordinance is now recognised as the first functional wine appellation law in history, the world's first AOC. A system built not to protect quality, but to protect a monopoly, and it worked for 600 years. In 1484, Pope Innocent VIII issued a papal bull that would shape the next 5 centuries of European medicine. He didn't target a disease, he didn't target a poison, he targeted a plant that was healing people, and he called it an unholy sacrament of the satanic mass. Cannabis had been used across Europe for centuries, not recreationally, medicinally. Midwives used cannabis-infused ointments to manage pain during childbirth. Healers used tinctures to treat inflammation and induce sleep. Wise women, the community doctors of the medieval world, used it to provide relief that the church simply could not offer. And that was the real problem. The church's entire theological model was built on deferred reward. Suffer now, obey now, and receive your fulfillment in the afterlife. A plant that grew in the ground and provided immediate relief, real, tangible, physical relief, was an existential threat to that model. Why pray for healing when you could grow it in your garden? So the papal bull Summis Desiderantes Affectibus, pushed by Dominican inquisitors including Heinrich Kramer, officially labelled cannabis-based medicine as maleficium, harmful magic. Those who continued to cultivate or use the plant for healing were handed over to the Inquisition. The erasure succeeded not because the argument was convincing, it succeeded because the enforcement was violent beyond imagination. Industrial hemp survived. The church needed rope and sails for its naval ambitions, but the knowledge of cannabis as medicine was systematically driven underground, erased from pharmacopoeias, stripped from herbals, and the women who carried that knowledge were burned. What the church couldn't destroy, it demonized, and what it demonized, it eventually erased. No plant in medieval Europe carried more terror than the mandrake. Its gnarled root grew in the shape of a human body, twisted limbs, a swollen torso, something that looked disturbingly alive. And according to legend, if you pulled it from the ground, it would emit a scream so powerful it could kill the person who heard it. That legend wasn't accidental, it was manufactured. Mandrake, Mandragora officinarum, contained a cocktail of tropane alkaloids, including atropine and scopolamine. In the right doses, it was one of the most powerful anesthetics available in the medieval world. Surgeons used it, healers used it, and the church watched as ordinary people accessed a form of unconsciousness, a death-like sleep, that had no theological explanation. That terrified them. The elaborate rituals required to harvest mandrake, using a dog tied to the root to pull it from the ground, standing upwind, covering your ears, were reframed by the church not as safety precautions but as demonic pacts. The plant wasn't medicine, it was sorcery. No single royal edict banned mandrake across all of Europe. It didn't need one. The erasure was accomplished through something more powerful than law: social terror. Monastic prohibitions spread. Herbals that included mandrake began appearing with marginal notes in Latin. Prohibitum est exercitium ab ecclesia catholica. This practice is forbidden by the Catholic Church. Generation by generation, the knowledge retreated. The plant survived in the wild, but the understanding of how to use it safely, medicinally, effectively, was reduced to whispers, then to folklore, then to nothing. Before hops, there was henbane. For over 1,000 years, European brewers used Hyoscyamus niger, henbane, to flavour and preserve their ale. It produced a drink that was more narcotic, more sedating, and more psychoactive than anything made with hops. Medieval communities used it the way we use alcohol today, to relax, to sleep, to dull the edges of an extraordinarily hard life. And then in 1516, the Bavarian beer purity law, the Reinheitsgebot, declared that beer could only contain 3 ingredients: water, barley, hops. That was it. 1,000 years of herbal brewing tradition, criminalized in a single sentence. The official justification was consumer protection, health and safety. But the timing tells a different story. Henbane ale produced effects that were difficult to control and impossible to tax in the same way that standardized hop-based beer could be. A population drinking henbane ale was harder to manage than a population drinking regulated beer. The plant itself, which had grown in kitchen gardens across Europe for centuries, was reclassified. No longer a crop, now a noxious weed, a classified poison, something to be feared rather than cultivated. Henbane contains hyoscyamin and scopolamine. In large doses, it is genuinely dangerous. But medieval brewers had understood dosage through generations of practice. That knowledge was never dangerous. It was inconvenient. And inconvenient knowledge, in the wrong political climate, gets erased. Belladonna's story begins with vanity and ends with assassination. Atropa belladonna, deadly nightshade, got its name from the women of Renaissance Venice who used its extracts to dilate their pupils. Dilated pupils were considered beautiful, seductive, a sign of desire. The plant's name literally means beautiful lady. But let's talk about what this actually looked like in practice. because this wasn't a fringe beauty hack, this was mainstream. Venetian noblewomen would stand before polished bronze mirrors and apply drops of belladonna extract directly into their eyes before court appearances, before audiences, before any social encounter where being looked at mattered. The blurred vision it caused, a known side effect, was simply accepted as the price of beauty. They couldn't see clearly, but they looked extraordinary. And then the men in power started dying. The same alkaloid that dilated pupils, atropine, also caused hallucinations, confusion, and in sufficient doses, a deep comatose sleep that was almost indistinguishable from death. The margin between a beauty dose and a lethal one was thin, dangerously thin, and someone at some point noticed. Assassins noticed. Belladonna became the poison of choice for political murders across Renaissance Europe. It appeared in Shakespeare's Macbeth and Hamlet not as exotic fiction, but as a reflection of genuine contemporary fear. Kings were dying, lords were dying, and belladonna was everywhere. Here's what made it so devastating as a weapon. It was slow, it was subtle. A lethal dose didn't kill you immediately. It induced a progressive deterioration that looked, to a medieval physician, exactly like a fever, exactly like a natural death. There was no test for it. There was no antidote, and the plant itself grew wild across the European countryside. You couldn't trace it. You couldn't regulate it. It was everywhere, and anyone with the knowledge to use it held the power of life and death over anyone they chose. The nobility understood this, and it terrified them in the specific way that only a weapon they cannot defend against can terrify a ruling class. The church responded by calling it the devil's candy. Municipal authorities in Venice began restricting its sale. Monastic infirmaries removed it from their shelves, and the women who had been using it cosmetically, the ones who had started this entire chain of events with nothing more than a desire to look beautiful, were suddenly suspect, suddenly dangerous, suddenly witches. Because that's how the erasure always works. First you associate the plant with harm, then you associate the people who use it with evil, and then you don't need to ban it. People police themselves. They pull it from their own gardens because they're afraid of what their neighbours will think. Because they're afraid of the knock on the door at night. And as safer medicinal alternatives were developed, belladonna retreated from domestic gardens entirely, surviving only in the tightly controlled records of licensed pharmacies. What's remarkable is that belladonna was genuinely useful. In controlled doses, atropine remains one of the most important compounds in modern medicine, used today in eye examinations, cardiac emergencies, and nerve agent treatment. The plant wasn't erased because it was useless. It was erased because it was too powerful in the wrong hands. And the wrong hands in medieval Europe meant anyone who wasn't already in power. If belladonna was the devil's candy, aconite was the devil's weapon. Aconitum napellus, also known as wolfsbane or monkshood, is one of the most toxic plants in the European landscape. Its purple flowers look almost cheerful growing along riverbanks and mountain meadows. It has the appearance of something harmless, something ornamental, and that appearance is what makes it uniquely lethal. Because there is no safe dose of aconite, not really. In ancient Rome, Emperor Trajan made growing it a capital offence, not because it had no uses, because its only recognised use was killing people, and the Romans, who had survived enough political assassinations to recognise a pattern, decided that the only response to a plant with no safe civilian application was to make its possession a death sentence. Medieval authorities inherited that fear and built on it. But here's the detail that most historians gloss over. Aconite poisoning is agonising in a very specific and identifiable way. It starts as a tingling in the mouth and fingertips, then numbness, then a creeping paralysis that moves inward toward the heart. The victim remains conscious, aware of exactly what is happening to them, until the cardiac arrhythmia becomes fatal. Medieval physicians who saw it knew what it was. They just couldn't stop it. And that knowledge, that aconite kills consciously, that it lets its victims experience every moment of their own death, made it more than just a poison. It made it a statement, a message. Choosing aconite to kill someone wasn't just murder, it was a declaration of power, of contempt, of the absolute dominance of the person who administered it over the person who received it. Medieval authorities couldn't allow that kind of power to circulate freely. Aconite was erased from domestic gardens through a legal principle that was almost elegant in its brutality. Under laws derived from the Roman Lex Cornelia, possession of aconite wasn't just illegal. It was treated as evidence of murderous intent. You didn't need to have poisoned anyone. Having the plant was enough to convict you. Think about what that means. In a world before forensics, before toxicology, before any reliable method of proving what someone did, the law created a shortcut. If you grew it, you intended to kill. The plant was its own confession, and the punishment was death. This created a very particular kind of social terror. Because aconite grew wild, it still does. It grows in ditches and meadows and along the edges of fields across Europe and Asia. You could stumble across it on a morning walk. You could find it growing in your own hedgerow without having planted it. And if someone with a grudge informed on you, if your neighbour decided to report that they'd seen wolfsbane near your property, the legal presumption was already against you. But here's what makes aconite's story different from the others. It wasn't fully erased. It survived in two very specific locations, both controlled by institutions powerful enough to handle it. The first was the monastic garden. Monks working in minute and carefully measured doses so small they required specialised knowledge to prepare safely, used aconite to induce visionary states. There is evidence across multiple monastic traditions that controlled microdosing of aconite was part of certain contemplative practices. The near-death sensation it produced at sublethal doses was interpreted as spiritual transcendence, as closeness to God. The monks weren't misusing the plant. They had developed a sophisticated understanding of its pharmacology centuries before that word existed. The second was the armory. Military authorities used it to create poison-tipped arrows and wolf-killing baits, hence the name wolfsbane. Entire packs of wolves could be eliminated using aconite-laced meat, protecting livestock in a time when a single wolf attack could mean the difference between a village surviving the winter or not. The military application was so valued that armies kept their own aconite supplies under guard. So aconite wasn't banned because it was dangerous. It was banned for ordinary people because it was dangerous in ordinary hands. The same plant that could get a peasant executed was being cultivated by monks and soldiers under institutional protection. The danger hadn't changed, only the hands had. Power doesn't eliminate dangerous things, it monopolizes them. The last erasure on this list is the quietest, and in some ways the most devastating, because every plant we've talked about so far was erased by someone with a reason. A duke protecting his wine monopoly, a pope protecting church authority. Assassins and their victims locked in an arms race of botanical knowledge and botanical terror. In every case there was an enemy, there was intention, there was someone who made a choice to destroy something. Skirret had no enemy, and that somehow makes it worse. Sium cicerum, skirret, was a perennial root vegetable that appeared at royal banquets across England and France for 400 years. Medieval writers described its flavour as sweeter than parsnip, sweeter than sweet potato. The Roman Emperor Tiberius valued it so highly that he demanded it as tribute from Germanic territories, the equivalent of a conquered nation being forced to send its finest wine or most precious metal, except it was this humble root that a Roman emperor considered worth the same treatment. In medieval England, it appeared in the household accounts of kings. Henry VIII ate it. Elizabeth I's cooks served it at state banquets. It was considered a food of prestige and pleasure, not because it was rare, but because it was extraordinarily good. Here is what nobody tells you about skirret. It grew in clusters of 8 to 12 finger-sized roots. It thrived in poor soil, in partial shade, in cold winters that would kill most modern commercial crops. You planted it once and harvested it for decades. No irrigation, no fertilizer, no intervention. It simply grew, year after year, in soil that most of our current agricultural system would consider unworkable. For a medieval peasant farming marginal land with no access to the inputs that modern agriculture depends on, skirret wasn't just food, it was insurance. It was the crop that grew when nothing else would. The harvest that came even in bad years. The vegetable that required almost nothing and gave back more than almost anything else you could plant. It was never banned by edict. No pope condemned it. No duke declared it disloyal. It was erased by something more modern and in many ways more ruthless. The machine. When industrial agriculture arrived, it brought combine harvesters, built to pull one large uniform root from the ground in a single motion. One shape, one size, one harvesting motion, repeated at speed across thousands of acres. The entire system, the machinery, the logistics, the supply chain, was designed around uniformity, around predictability, around the idea that a crop which couldn't be standardized was a crop that had no future. Skirret grows in tangled clusters. Every plant is slightly different. The roots spread in unpredictable directions. You have to harvest it by hand, carefully, untangling the roots from the soil one cluster at a time. In a system where efficiency is the only value that matters, a crop that requires human hands is a crop that gets replaced. So skirret was reclassified, not as dangerous, as inconvenient, not as satanic, as obsolete, and then quietly removed from seed catalogues, from commercial farming operations, from agricultural colleges, from the minds of anyone who might have carried the knowledge forward. Within 2 generations, it had moved from royal banquet tables to living memory. Within 3, it was almost gone entirely. The same happened to scorzonera, the black-rooted vegetable that medieval physicians prescribed for digestive complaints, that gardeners across Europe grew without a second thought, and that modern science has since confirmed contains the highest concentration of prebiotic inulin of any root vegetable, 20% by dry weight, more than chicory root, which is the industrial source that most prebiotic supplements on the market today are actually made from. Think about that. We are currently manufacturing prebiotic supplements from an inferior source, because the superior source is a plant that European gardeners grew routinely for centuries and then forgot. The knowledge wasn't destroyed in a fire, it wasn't burned by the Inquisition. It was simply allowed to lapse, allowed to become inconvenient, allowed to disappear because no one with economic power had any incentive to keep it alive. And scorzonera is just one example. Researchers studying pre-industrial European agriculture have identified dozens of crops, perennial vegetables, drought-resistant grains, companion planting combinations that produced yields comparable to modern monoculture without the inputs, without the soil degradation, without the ecological destruction that our current system depends on. These plants weren't forgotten because they failed. They were forgotten because the system that replaced them had no room for anything it couldn't standardize, ship, and sell at scale. And unlike a papal bull or a ducal decree, there was no single moment of erasure to point to, no villain to name, just the slow, quiet replacement of complexity with uniformity, of resilience with efficiency, of centuries of accumulated knowledge with whatever the machine could process. That's the most insidious erasure of all. Because at least when the church burned something, there was a record of the burning. When the market simply stops caring, when knowledge becomes economically valueless, it disappears without even leaving a scar. 7 plants, 7 different methods of erasure. A duke who used economic law to protect his monopoly, a pope who used religious terror to eliminate competition with church authority, municipal governments who used public safety as cover for political control, and an industrial system that used efficiency as the final, silent executioner of everything it couldn't commodify. The pattern is always the same. Find something that gives ordinary people power, the power to heal themselves, feed themselves, or think for themselves, and then find a reason, any reason, to take it away. What's remarkable isn't that these plants were erased. What's remarkable is that some of them survived. Gamay wine is experiencing a global revival. The pharmaceutical rediscovery of digitalis from foxglove changed cardiology forever. Researchers at Cornell University are actively studying mixed-grain farming systems that medieval peasants used instinctively. Heritage seed companies are bringing back skirret, scorzonera, and dozens of other forgotten crops to gardeners who are tired of depending on a system that was never designed with their health in mind. The medieval authorities were effective at erasing these plants from the law. They were never able to erase them from the soil, and every time you choose to learn what they tried to make you forget, you take back something they spent centuries trying to bury. If this is the kind of forgotten knowledge you want more of, subscribe. We dig into history that was deliberately hidden every single week. Drop a comment and tell me, which of these 7 plants shocked you the most? I read every single one.